So after a few survival-focused builds that I did previously, I finally decided to make like a full glass cannon DPS build this time. Except it won't be a normal DPS build, but instead it will be a dual staff build that I've been working on for a while now. And the biggest downside with this one is that I actually can't really solo farm. Or if I do, I can only pull like 1 or 2 mobs at most. On the other hand, I made it so that you can pretty much have 99% uptime on DPS with this extremely high cooldown reduction setup. Although, before starting the video, I just wanted to clarify that I'm doing this for fun. So if you're looking for an efficient DPS build, then I think this build is not for you. So one of the biggest obstacles with a dual staff build to achieve a high amount of damage per second is that I won't have other alternate active skills from my non-staff secondary weapon. Like for example, Salvation Chain, Icebound Tomb, and High Focus are all pretty terrible skills for a PV DPS build. So to solve this problem, I came up with a super simple solution, which is stacking as much cooldown reduction as possible alongside wisdom and mana recovery. And so to do this, I chose the 2 highest cooldown reduction staffs, which are Umbramancer Staff and Toblek Quarterstaff. The 2 of them combined will give you a total of 23% cooldown reduction, which is actually massive coming from the weapons alone. Although when possible, I would rather get the Aridus Staff to replace Umbramancer, since the passive as well as base damage worths way more than the cooldown reduction that Umbramancer gives. Swirling Essence Hat is amazing in terms of budget and its usefulness because it provides you the highest amount of cooldown reduction out of all headgears. I actually wanted to get the Ascended Guardian hood at first, but then I realized that I don't really need perception for a PvE staff build, and it's super expensive on top of that. I also love the Divine Justicar armor and boots, because they provide me so much wisdom, which is my core stat for this build. Although I wish they would just add set effects to it, like, I don't know, maybe 2-piece set effect would give you 10% increased mana efficiency and stuff like that. Anyways, moving on, I chose the Executioner breeches for my leg piece because it's really good budget-wise, and it also provides 4 dexterity and 4 wisdom, which are great DPS material. The reason why I picked Permafrost gloves over Divine Justicar gloves is that Permafrost gloves provides the same stat value, except it has way more mana recovery, which is extremely important for Mana Ball Eruption. The same reasoning goes for my necklace and bracelet, since I wanted to focus more on Mana Ball Eruption damage, so I will need a whole lot of mana recovery. And plus, I don't really need strength or perception from Clasp of Conqueror or Primal King bracers, so I don't think I missed out too much on damage overall. Currently I'm using Sapphire Ring, even though I don't really need perception. But then, I think again I still at least need some hit chance in PvE, right? Since sometimes I miss some of my hits, but I can kinda get away with it with low hit chance, since most of my skills are multiple hits. And for the other ring, I definitely suggest using Violent Signet, because despite being a blue gear, the stats it offers you are amazing. 5 dexterity and 5.5% attack speed is actually a big deal for me, since with more attack speed, you can cast stuff like Judgment Lightning or Meteor faster, and it's also way cheaper for me to upgrade the skill damage boost trait as well. Girdle of Spectral Skulls is absolutely a must-have as a DPS, because not only it gives more dexterity, but it also gives mana recovery at the same time, which I really need as a staff user. So overall for gearing, I just get as much wisdom, dexterity, cooldown reduction, and lastly mana recovery for this kind of build. This is my setup for pretty much everything, including mob clearing and bossing, although I'm just reminding you that this is not an optimal setup for staff. So in general, with this setup as a whole, I try to focus my damage on Mana Ball Eruption, which is why you see me stacking a lot of mana recovery, because to proc the Mana Ball Eruption, you need to have as many projectiles as possible, so stuff like Meteor or Thunder Blessing won't work. Which is why, instead of getting focused firebombs, I use the instant cast version because it lets me throw out 3 bombs instead of 1 single firebomb. And don't get me wrong, focused firebomb damage is actually way better and more optimal for DPS. But I don't really like using it because that's not how I want my playstyle to be. Redemptive Barrier is a must-have no matter what content you're doing, because it's your only survival skill as a staff user. And since you're using mana instead of health during Redemptive Barrier, it's pretty important to get max mana traits on your gear, as well as stacking Wisdom. On a side note, you can also pop Redemptive Barrier, and then use Thunder Blessing during certain bosses' mechanics if you want to skip them. Although just keep in mind that Thunder Blessing doesn't do damage, so you should never use that skill as an offensive skill. Another important point is that before using Fireball Barrage, you have to make sure your target has at least 7 to 10 stacks of Burning, because each stack of Burning will add 1 Fireball to your Fireball Barrage, and more Fireballs means more Mana Ball Eruption damage. Using either Ice Spear Bombardment or Icebound Tomb before using Judgment Lightning is very important when you are clearing mobs, because both skills will apply Frost to your target, which will then allow your lightning to damage nearby mobs. Burning Smokescreen is also one of your survival skill, as it gives you a free dash, and the lava pool that you left behind also slows down the melee mobs that are chasing you. So in general, I just freestyle most of the time, so you just need to remember to use high focus before using Meteor, Judgment Lightning, and Fireball Barrage. And lastly, for weapon mastery, I just picked the middle tree because I wanted the 5% cooldown reduction from the last node.